Dr. Iwan Syahril, who until recently was the Director General of Teachers and Education Personnel, but now is into early childhood K-12 sector. He's the Director General of the K-12 sector. And Pa Iwan will be joining us in the second half of this session. He was originally planned to be in the first half, and then we go into a roundtable. But he is at the ministry right now in a meeting, and he's just rounding that up, and he should be here in about 40 minutes. So we will do the roundtable first, and then we will have a session with Dr. Iwan. Just to give you a background on Dr. Iwan so that I don't have to repeat it when he's here, the chair of the Education Working Group of the G20. So among all the education representatives of the 20 countries, Pa Iwan was the chair. And they had several meetings in Bali under that responsibility of his, where he had in-depth discussions with all the other ministers across these 20 developed nation countries, right? Because you have the superpower nations and you have the middle power nations in the G20. And I think there's a lot of insight in the way they have all developed education. The footprint or the framework that they've adopted, of course, are different because the challenges are different. But Indonesia, I think, has been appreciated greatly for the kind of initiatives that in such a short period of time are being undertaken to really, truly transform the way Indonesia is approaching its biggest challenge, which is the education system. And I could not think of a better guest to have who would leave us with things to think about, because we have identified very correctly in the last 2 days, one thread was common across every discussion. And that thread, if you were to put it in simple terms, was talent. And if you would look at it deeper, it comes with education. So education has been a common thread, and as James Castle rightly said in his video address, that it is Indonesia's Achilles heel. And it needs a very different kind of team to address these kind of challenges and find solutions. And I'm very proud and I would say pleased to say that Indonesia has finally found that team, the team that is really making transformational changes. We have with Minister Nadiem Makarim, who I mentioned earlier, looking at putting the entire thing on top of it, upside down, and looking at re-engineering how education is built into the country. But all ideas can only be executed if you have the right people at the leadership level. Pa Iwan, Dr. Iwan Syahril is one such person who is at the very top of the food chain of how this transformation is taking place. And we are very pleased to have him here. So a big round of applause, Pa Iwan. And may I invite Pa Iwan on stage? Yes. So I'll give a brief introduction to Pa Iwan before we get started on the session. Pa Iwan, I got to know Pa Iwan when he first assumed his role at the ministry, because I used to go to the ministry, we used to do some roundtables, and we used to have a lot of discussions. And I got a chance to meet with Pa Iwan, and I still remember vividly that 20-minute discussion we had in that meeting room outside. And it really struck me that there is a dramatic change in the way the ministry is restructuring itself in bringing the kind of talent into the Ministry of Education. Because a challenge, as we have identified correctly about education, where do we start and where do we end? It can't be done unless there is some fundamental change in the ministry itself. So that itself was a great starting point. And over the years, I've got to know Pa Iwan very well, not only through the Economic Forum. The Education Forum is another forum that we started. And through our company Orbit and Microsoft, we did a pilot project with Pa Iwan, which has now become a national program for upskilling teachers. It's actually on the verge of being launched. They're starting the first batches in the provinces. If I'm not mistaken, they're announcing something on Hari Guru tomorrow? Yes. So, it's going in the right direction. And honestly, if I were to state a fact, it is that we wouldn't have got this far if we had not got the support of the ministry, and especially Dr. Iwan. Dr. Iwan's role in today's discussion is not about that, actually. It is something that maybe not everybody knows here, that Dr. Iwan is I would say, the chairman of the Education Working Group of G20. And I know how hard he worked during that time, because he would be half the time in Bali, which is a nice thing to do. I don't think you would complain about that. But he would complain about different things like the work hours. Because, when you are working with G20, you have similar problems we're having here in a much larger scale, is working across time zones. So you are now connecting and discussing with people in 20 countries who are in completely different time zones. And how do you do that if without burning the midnight oil? So that is the reason why at 11 at night, Iwan is still working. And, at odd times, so those are I think it completely disrupted your schedule, Yapa. So I'm not going to go into that. I'm going to allow you to share that yourself. But today we are here to listen to Iwan about what does it mean to be the chair of Education Working Group? What are the kind of issues that were discussed there? What kind of solutions were found? And how was it received by all these so-called superpowers to hear the Indonesia side of the story of how it's dealing with its education transformation journey? And all these other questions that I'm sure many of you may also have, we will be able to take that up in the Q&A session with Dr. Iwan. So without much further ado, Iwan, I would like you to get the proceeding started. Maybe make a statement, share a few insights on how was your experience. We are very curious to know what does it mean to be the chair of such an important initiative where Indonesia was given center stage for something which is very, very transformational in every economy. So over to you, Iwan. You can just switch it on and there's a time delay here.
Thank you, Sachin. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor, actually, to speak in front of you and to share some of our experiences, Indonesia's experiences in G20, especially in the context of education. I never thought about leading G20. It happened very fast. I was international relations major as an undergrad, like 30 years ago. I thought I took the wrong major because after I graduated, I decided to be a teacher. And then my my career as a teacher led me to the Ministry of Education, and boom, I was the chair of G20, and all of a sudden of my training as international relations, or of course it's about being a diplomat, came again alive, and I thought, oh, okay, life is like Forrest Gump says, it's like a box of chocolate. You never know what you're gonna get. It's like I feel like it's like a full circle, and of course it's not easy because, like Pak Sachin said, it's not only managing about the issues, but also I think what I learned more is about the diplomacy aspect of the multilateral forum, and how to find relevance. I think that's also the question for multilateralism in the world currently. Especially in the context of G20, that's not, in Indonesia as a chair, we decided to first, the president wants this to be an inclusive forum. So we deliberately have special invitees, not only including the developed countries, but also the voices of the South. Like for instance, like Senegal and Fiji Island, and then all the Pacific countries, in addition to, of course, Singapore or Holland, and etc. So that's like something that the president wants to define our G20, not only to think about the top 20 countries, but also more inclusive, so bring the voices about how we can shape the world into a better place for all. In education, I think the pandemic was at the back of the mind of everyone, of course in education, just like in any other sector. And when we were given the torch for G20 presidency last year, the education working group, we started to have meetings with thought leaders, organizations, internal, domestically, and internationally, to find out what are the issues of relevance for the community of educators and also government in general. And then we put an issue note focusing on 4 things. The first one is universal quality education. What we mean by this was that the pandemic has exacerbated the equity issue in education, widening the gap, and it's become much bigger if we don't anticipate it sooner. So then we decided that all around the world, because of the pandemic, the issue of equity becomes such a large issue. So we want to strengthen the commitment to 2030 Sustainable Development Goals in education, which is inclusive, quality education for all. So that is like the spirit of our first theme, universal quality education. The second one, although this is arguably could be part of like this first one, but we want to make it explicit about the digital technologies. All around the world, again, it's the same. There is a phrase that I learned that even the most developed countries are taking baby steps again because of the pandemic in terms of technology. Even the most experienced teachers, they felt that they needed to learn it all over again because what they were trained and what they knew was not working during the pandemic. So it was very disruptive for the education ecosystem because of the digital technologies. But at the same time, we know that it was a very positive momentum because we saw resilience of the educators all around the world to try to use the digital technology. And it's also happening in Indonesia. In particular, we knew like when the President Jokowi asked the minister to be the Minister of Education, one of like the most important aspects is his experience in technology. So how to use technology to leapfrog in terms of our education progress. And so this was in 2019 before the pandemic, right? And we did like a survey about what we need to do in terms of technology development. And then we learned that there's a lot of like not inability to use digital technologies for our educators, but it's more like the anxiety level is high. So suddenly there's a mental block when they want to learn about technology. And what happened during the pandemic was people were forced, including the educators, to use the technology. So it's like there's no other choice, you have to try. And then because they were forced to try and they needed to experiment maybe little small things first and then more like, more advanced things. And what we see is that there is a momentum of educators trying to adopt and adapt the technology for their instruction and assessment, collaboration. And we thought that in G20, that was something that we needed to talk about. So that's number two. Number three is, and this is something that we want to give a special flavor, if we can say that, to our G20, especially in education, with the Indonesian spirit. The spirit is the gotong royong spirit. I think this is so common in Indonesia, but we want to translate it to how we can use the gotong royong spirit for transforming education all around the world. And we use the term for our third issue is solidarity and partnership. Because gotong royong is not just about collaboration. There is a sense of social empathy. Like what's happening now, the earthquake in Cianjur, for instance, suddenly, you get like all around Indonesia, they feel like just they want to help somehow. And the gotong royong is working because of it's already deep into our culture, despite our various kinds of cultures. So, and the social empathy also brings the social responsibility, a collective responsibility. And we feel that this is also related to the pandemic because when we fight the pandemic, we cannot only think about our own action, what we want, but we need to also think about the consequences of our action to others. So then we are all safe in terms of the pandemic. And we felt that this was a very good way to discuss in the G20 Education Working Group. And the last, of course, the future of work post-COVID-19. We already learned, even before the pandemic, that this is a different kind of era. This is the era of disruption, when disruption is the new normal. And what we've learned from the COVID, it's further disrupted. So we think that whatever that we thought was for education, that we anticipated the world will be disrupted this way, we knew that during the pandemic, it's further disrupted. So we need to rethink and reimagine the education system again. And this is actually part of our overall or underlying theme, which is not only to think about recovery, but we want to reimagine, so in order to rebuild. So in other words, I think this is in line with the United Nations General Assembly, the Transforming Education Summit last September, where the UN wanted all countries, the leaders, not only to think about recovery, but also transformation. This is the momentum, not only for survival, but this is the momentum for us to rethink, redesign, reimagine how education should be. So, Pak Shoaib, like your remarks about the importance of teachers, that is true. But we need to rethink and reimagine and to redesign and redefine what is the role of a teacher in this kind of education system and ecosystem that we are thinking. We feel in the G20 we need to see this in a different way, because the workforce post-COVID-19 will be much different because of what happened during the pandemic. And of course, during the discussion in the G20, the issue of geopolitical issue is dominating, especially from the diplomacy aspect. But if we look at it also in terms of the impact to all sectors, including education, I think that reminds us how important for us to be together, like the spirit of gotong royong, to be the way we see our shared global village and what we think about the future of this planet together. Because the impact of certain actions can also result in other kinds of situations in other sectors. So I'm happy also to say two other things. The first one, all G20 countries committed to use this momentum for recovery and transformation. That's very clear. The G20 countries, the special invitees, international organizations, we are united in that commitment. The second one is the gotong royong spirit. I felt that surprise. We had 4 working group meetings and 1 ministerial meeting. In the first working group, the Minister Makarim, explained about the principle of gotong royong. Just like a brief remark. It's not like a PowerPoint presentation. It's only 5 minutes, basically, speech, right? And suddenly, the delegates from some hybrid, some were in person, echoed that. Of course, they tried to catch the pronunciation of what the minister was saying, but they were suddenly connected to the sense of we need to be together, but also the sense of empathy and solidarity that we need to get to recover from the COVID pandemic and also to transform the education. There are at least 5 delegates who echoed the gotong royong. And by the second meeting, gotong royong became part of the draft in the declaration. And then by the third meeting, gotong royong was already the framework in the report that we're producing. And the fourth meeting, which is next to the ministerial meeting, all the ministers in the education working group, during their intervention, mentioned the word gotong royong. And then I was so moved by that and so proud, of course. And we presented about gotong royong during the Transforming Education Summit in the United Nations, because that is for the G20 Education Report, the important framework for the global recovery in education. So I think not only become there's this head of delegation from France. I met her in Paris, and he said to me, Iwan, thank you so much for introducing the concept of gotong royong. We've been trying to find that kind of word in English, but we couldn't find it. So thank you, Indonesia, for coining that term, so then we can know what we want to say, not so abstract anymore. So so I was like, okay, I didn't know that that word, no such word in English, but I think that is true, because when I was we were trying to say about gotong royong in the issue note, we're trying, what is the word? So then we use the phrase solidarity and partnership, because there's no such word. So as an Indonesian, I'm proud, but I think more importantly for us, how we can have this kind of togetherness in terms of fighting the challenges that's already here. Not only we are going to face it, it's already here. The world that is further disrupted by the pandemic. Hopefully, I think in the next few years to 2030, in particular, because we have our target together collectively for 2030 Sustainable Development Goal. At least we can reach the sustainable, the inclusive, the quality education for all, SDG 4, and hopefully the ASEAN spirit or other multilateral forums, of course the G20, under the India presidency now, and furthermore will go to bring us closer to the 2030. That is our hope in G20. Of course, this is not easy, always easier said than done, but I think if we all can be like the small bridge or either big bridge for making this hope to be reality, I'm sure we can reach that. And I think the spirit of gotong royong, collaboration between all sectors, is very much needed for our recovery and our transformation in education. We have a lot of homework in education. It's not easy to change, but I think we need to have good leaders. I think we are lucky in Indonesia to have Minister Makarim as the Minister of Education, because I think, and I learned from him, what is the most important thing is you have a clarity of purpose. The why, it should be very clear, and we over-communicate it again and again, and we know where we want to go. And this is, I think, in Merdeka Belajar, the emancipated learning movement, the minister is very clear on this. It's all about how we bring the future human resources of Indonesia, our current students, to be the best version of they can be and to be relevant to the workforce of the future. The collaboration, the participation of all sectors, the industry. You know that we have unbundled the higher education. Like 3 semesters can be taken out of their major. They can, even like 2 semesters can be spent in international organizations, in the NGOs, or in companies. And that is not taking the time away from the university, but it is part of the university experience. Because we believe in unbundling higher education, we believe in micro-credentials, and we believe in everyone. So going back to the definition of a teacher, anyone can be a teacher if they have the expertise to share, if they have the willingness to share, and if they can make a difference to our students' lives. So industry can be teachers. Doesn't have to be from the teacher training program only, because the speed of change is like crazy. We cannot keep up with that, the teacher training program, no matter how hard we're doing. So there is a term in Indonesia called alam takambang jadi guru. So the universe or the nature is already here for us to learn as our teacher. So this is the spirit of Kampus Merdeka or Merdeka Belajar. So it's not only in the classroom, but this whole universe can be our learning resources. So why don't we use that, and we take the wisdoms of all of the learning resources all around us. If we look at only in our institution, we are so limited. But if we look at in our ecosystem, we are so rich, we are so abundant. It's just about how to find that connection. I think maybe that's all that I can share at the beginning. Pak Sachin, thank you very much.
Thank you, Pa Iwan. Very inspiring, and I want to take up on a few things that you mentioned. The first thing is, firstly, when I learned Bahasa Indonesia 20 years ago, I realized Bahasa Indonesia had a lot of foreign words. So I had to congratulate you for introducing Indonesian words into the English language. And that's a great takeaway. Secondly, you also mentioned, the Gotong Royong concept. You gave a very clear example of the bencana, the earthquake that happened recently. And earlier today, we had a discussion on that. And I think, do you agree that certain tools are now allowing Gotong Royong to happen? Like, for example, I think the prime tool that was used for that was WhatsApp. So there was a WhatsApp group, everybody came onto WhatsApp, and technology is enabled making Gotong Royong happen because you have tools to do it, which I was trying to imagine if there wasn't any technology tool, how long would that reaction have taken and how well coordinated it could have been because you didn't have these tools. So the question to you is that in your chairing of the G20 Education Working Group, did you have a WhatsApp group? Well, how did you communicate? I mean, what is the interaction that actually goes on between these 20 nations? And how did you use technology for that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely technology helps how we can do the gotong royong. That is for sure. And I think we need to capitalize on the potential of technology for any kind of the good work that we're doing. For the G20 context, I think we have the WhatsApp group for sure, but we have to be sensitive of the WhatsApp group for the G20 countries. So I have maybe more like personal WhatsApp to some of the delegates, the heads of delegates. Because of, again, the geopolitical issue, I believe that's not quite a conducive kind of environment for the current time. But we have the WhatsApp group for me and my team. But more like the WhatsApp communication with others in the delegations.
Thank you, Pa. If you look at the way that the whole Education Working Group operated, and I think I remember reading some reports about it that you had released about some of the findings, etc., key takeaways that happened. In your view, did you not achieve something that you wanted to do? That you felt maybe you could have done more? That is one question. Or was there something surprising that you achieved that you did not expect before going into it?
Well, education community is kind of unique, Pak Sachin. I think the nature of education community everywhere is more like the sense of collectiveness is there. So I think we were quite successful in pushing our issue note. So in the first meeting, all countries agreed that was a very important, those are important issues to discuss. By the second meeting, we actually already finished in terms of going for the draft of the declaration. And the third meeting, we could finalize all aspects. I think we were quite optimistic at the time to reach a declaration. But then the fourth meeting was all about the geopolitical paragraph, literally, and we are almost there in terms of getting the declaration. If you ask me what's the one thing that I wish that could have happened that did not happen, I think it was that consensus for a declaration that was the most difficult aspect. We wanted to, I think this is another thing, we deliberately managed the expectation not to overwhelm the delegates on like long, winding paragraphs that are like maybe too complicated and open to so many multiple interpretations. I think what I learned before I started as chair is, okay, we need to budget our time, we need to budget our resources, and to see, okay, by this time, what could we reasonably achieve? And I think that assessment was very helpful and successful. So we picked the 4 themes that were resonating with the delegates. But we knew also that when we created the first draft of the declaration, it needed to be simple. So in education, we highlighted the key points and the key concepts with more like concrete actions rather than trying to be super, or the minister likes to use this term, like boiling the ocean. You want to make everything good and everything is so, perfect, and then suddenly, of course, different contexts can interpret it in multiple ways, and then it will be very challenging. So that is the more like the aspect of diplomacy. However, we know like the power of the declaration is not in how many words or how many pages that it has, but it's more about what is the strength of the words that are used by the countries in the paragraph. For instance, if we say that we recognize, that's a weak commitment. But if we say that we believe or we are committed, that is a strong commitment. And all countries know this. So there's like subtle things that we learn instead of trying to use like, maybe 10 sentences, we can use 2 sentences, and then it's as good as having the 10 sentences. So that is something that we also learn. So it saves us from a lot of, discussions, long-winded discussions that we know that we could not, yes, we would expect that, but at the time we tried to manage the expectation.
Thank you, Pa.
That's part of the strategy, Pa, in the multilateral forum.
A big lesson in diplomacy. So I'm going to go to the floor now. I'm going to actually open with the hosts of this panel first. So Rob is from Microsoft. Rob, would you like to have a question or a comment to Pa Iwan?
Thank you, Sachin, and Dr. Iwan, thank you for sharing the outcomes of the summit. And it's interesting to us from Microsoft, we're talking about educator capacity building, and you shared, at the same time, we're looking to rethink the role of an educator. Could you share some insights into what that rethinking may be? And I ask that from the perspective of, can we make adjustments early to be building those capabilities, or be in line with some of that thinking as you're moving through the recommendations and we're going on this journey together?
Yeah, I remember discussions about especially digital technologies in education. And we know that during the COVID pandemic, some countries experience maybe not big challenges, but some are having a lot of challenges, especially when it comes to the infrastructure. And then it goes on to the role of the human beings there, right? And the question whether teachers can be replaced. And I think even the most advanced countries, I remember it's like Germany, Japan, like strongly argued that, and then also echoed by other countries, that it should still, the human interaction in education is very important. So we need to protect that. And then the question then, how can technology can enhance that? So, and this is the question for all educators. To your question about what it could be, that is something that we need to explore together, because maybe it works differently in different contexts. I think for Indonesia, for instance, we created a platform. We called this platform Merdeka Mengajar. This platform that, like the vision is going to be a super app, right, for the education. But it's more like a teacher-facing platform instead of student-facing platform. Why? Because for us, we believe still like we need to really like enhance the capacity of the adults in the ecosystem so we can transform them, they can serve the students better. Of course, at the same time, we have our programs like laptops. I think the biggest laptops distribution ever in Indonesia is during our during the minister's term, and so on. But we know that we should not overlook the training for the adults. And talking about literacy, I think this is digital literacy. I think we should always be aware the core of digital literacy is literacy. Digital is the modality, but literacy is the key. So when we talk about digital literacy, a lot of times that I think also the discussion in the G20, countries tend to think about, oh, you need to know how to use this tool, that tool. Well, that is true. But if you don't have like the core skills, which is literacy, it's not going to be that powerful. So literacy is the ability for us, not only for being able to read and write, but it's more the thinking, problem solving, creative problem solving, and how to make sense of the information in a way that you can use for something that is productive. So again, I think this is also another thing in G20. We know we commit to focusing on the foundational skills part of it, which is the literacy, and especially literacy and numeracy, because we believe that that's the core before we use the modality, and the modality can be many, and of course digital technology will be a major one, but without the capacity, the core fundamental, it will not be that useful or powerful. Thank you.
That was excellent, actually. Nalin, would you like to take the next question?
I have been witness to the transformation in the ministry and the revolution that the minister and the team has brought. And for me, it has been a revelation, because normally with government ministries, you don't expect such proactiveness and such pace at which you work. I remember bumping into you in a flight from Padang a few weeks ago. And the first thing he asked me is, where is OGM? Can we go faster? When are we implementing? So, you expect a different response. So Iwan has always been more on the doer side, very, very positive on actually getting things done. So thanks.
That's from my boss, but my boss told me to do that, and I pass it to you.
I know whatever you all are doing will have an impact over many decades, and I've said this at various forums, including writing articles on that. Looking forward, you all are leaving behind such a rich legacy. We are on the cusp in a couple of years where we could have a new, we will have a new government, etc. Do you believe there is adequate momentum and buy-in overall from parents, educators, and the political class for continuity of the change?
Wow, the question of sustainability. Yeah, this is the challenge. We have to admit this is something that at the back of our mind from the very beginning. Because again, education is always lives in the political ecosystem, and it's very dynamic, very fluid, right? And we know that we will have a new president, because maximum term for our president is two terms. So then, what does it mean for education? The minister likes to use this analogy in the law of innovation. You have to get the early adopters first. And that is the first 20% of everything. Teachers who are supporting this vision and this movement, principals, school supervisors, and now the local governments as an ecosystem, not individuals. So what we are trying to do, we're trying to get these early adopters, but also we know when things or the programs, or like maybe if you use the word products, like in technology, already the users, like spoiling the users feel like very happy with that, it's very difficult to reverse it. Just like, if you use any app now for buying food, think about it, like before the app existed, And now how easy it is, can it be reversed? Can we go back to, just buy food without the app anymore? Or purchase anything without the app, or doing bank transaction without the app? It's not. So the same kind of vision or movement, a process that we're trying to push in education, especially the use of technology, Panalin. So then we want to create the early adopters. At the same time, we're creating programs and products like Campus Merdeka, unbundling higher education. 3 semesters outside the major. Huge resistance at the beginning by the university. You can imagine, of course, right?
We experienced it with you.
You're part of your orbit. It's like,
We're also part of campus.
it's a huge disruption. Of course, gonna be, if you want to transform, expect disruption. That's just the law of the land. Just the risk, the name of the game, right? So we know that. But the first year, huge resistance, very difficult. Second year, we started to see, okay, there are champions here and there trying to implement the vision. And by the third year, we feel now it's like normal. Like 400,000 students participated in this program, 3 semesters outside their major. We couldn't have imagined that in the first year when we had like huge resistance. But again, if you have a clear vision and the why, I think this will help us to convince the early adopters to join the movement. And let's do this. And because once they see the impact and the benefit of that, they know this is the way to go. This is what we need to do. So the defenders of the Merdeka Belajar will become not the policy makers anymore, but all the stakeholders, the users of this program. And I think that will make the impact or the change sustainable. At least so, one more thing. Internal change, what you don't see, also internally, the ministry is also changing. The way that we work, the way that we solve problems, it's not as rigid as before. Like for example, in my team, I don't know, maybe Pak Sachin and Pak Nalin, maybe you have seen this also. Because there's no echelon 3, echelon 4, so now all directorates, we have like a task force. So the task force comprises of members from related directorates, so they can problem solve, they can execute, and of course they coordinate with the leaders once in a while, much faster. Like let me give you an example. Like school transformation program called Sekolah Penggerak, Lighthouse School Program. Before the logic of how bureaucracy works, the leaders have a meeting and then decide on something and goes to all the directorates. Directorates goes down to their staff and lower, and then here and lower, and then they discuss, and then it goes up again, goes up to the directors, and then meet the leaders, have a leaders meeting, and then decide. Now what we do, bypass, task force. So, we decide, create a task force, so all this team at the bottom, they work together in more like egalitarian kind of working culture. So when you ask me about my working hours, my team has crazier working hours. I have to salute the civil servants. I'm very surprised. There are a lot of idealistic and workaholic civil servants that I feel like better than my teammates during my time at the private sector. This is amazing to me to see. And they're working because for us in the, let's say in a company or in an institution, private institution, we are only dealing with our limited stakeholders. For my team, they're dealing with stakeholders all around Indonesia. Imagine Indonesia is your company for education. Being always on their toes to engage with stakeholders from all over. Not only just provinces, but also Pemda, Kabupaten Kota, Bapak Ibu. So Kabupaten Kota, we have 548 local governments that have the authority for regulating their education. I give you what it means. If we have representative of one local government of these 548, And one of them shared with us about their challenges so then we can solve their problem. For one local government, just 5 minutes presentation, times 548. You know how much time is that? 45 hours. 45 hours. No sleeping, no break, continuously. 45 hours. And that's the scale of what my team have to face. And not only one for one topic, multiple issues. And at the moment, if you think that we're doing it at a very fast pace, it's because we have a lot of champions, change agents inside that have been empowered. And that's also part of how we can create sustainable change. You cannot create sustainable change only by going for programs for externally. You need to also do it internally. Internal organizational change, very important.
So did you face any resistance for that?
Of course,
But I can vouch for the timings. I remember Ravi, who runs Campus Merdeka, telling me that we get calls from the team working in the middle of the night on public holidays, etc. And my only response was, learn from that, stay in office all night.
They are also fighting for a cause. If the leaders set the clarity of purpose, I think it makes it a lot easier for the organization to feel empowered and just like fighting for that as well, even like harder than the leaders. I think I learned it from this job. I never thought that I would be able to do this because I've never worked in this large, scale organization. But I've seen a lot of amazing civil servants as a change agents. So we do have hope for our government and for us in the Ministry of Education, Culture, Research and Technology. We want to think about how to be the government 4.0. So the bureaucracy 4.0. So meaning that is relevant for the complex, disruptive environment that we need to always problem solve constantly. Thank you.
So, Iwan, you made a very key point that transformation has to come from within. And what triggered this actually? Because, if you look around the room and ask people what is their general impression of civil servants, not only here, in any country, it's a poor impression. There hasn't been any, I would say, groundbreaking kind of a concept where we've seen the government come together and get things done. So what was it? I would say, what triggered this? Is it that, is it a leadership thing? Is it a vision thing? Or is it that actually there are motivated people within the system? I'm saying, what was your learnings from, because I think this is something that can be applied everywhere. There are a lot of ministries that can go through this kind of change and we'll see massive transformation at a very high scale. Could you share a few insights on how did you trigger this ability to get everybody, the best out of everybody?
I think leadership matters. I think the most important human resource are the leaders. I think it comes from the president, I would say, how he would have the boldness to choose a millennial yeah. with no education sector background to be the Minister of Education. The president has a vision, what needs to be done. And then the minister also is very clear, like I said, like the purpose must be clear. And also the principle of, I think, execution. The leaders have to know, especially for a country as big as Indonesia, to be able, by that I mean, to be able to make peace with a lot of situations that are not ideal. And then have the vision how to get there, and then, like I said, the minister always said, okay, don't boil the ocean. You're trying to boil the ocean, we'll never get there. Bold decision, and we need to protect what we want to do. For example, I'll give you an example. When first the COVID hit us, you know what happened in the government? A lot of the adjustment for the budget, the ministry's budget. I remember in 2020, 2021, 4 times a year. It means that the money taken from our budget to help for COVID, right? It happens so bad, and we need to readjust our budget, meaning, and also it impacts our operation. I remember very clearly what the minister said. First, please protect our priority programs. I don't care, protect the priority programs. Those are the things that we need to focus on, protect those programs. What is the implication? Other programs will not get enough budget, or maybe no budget at all. And the minister said, that's okay. If then our performance in the end of the year, it's not so good, that's fine. But protect our priority programs. And that's a bold decision. Because for me, I learned it because I didn't have that kind of entrepreneurial kind of leadership experience before. We in education, we try to build a consensus, right? We try to make everyone happy, right? So, okay, then a little bit over here, a little bit over there. Okay, at least, okay, this is the pandemic, but we still have activities. That's good. Because then the objective, what is the objective? The objective is to get the things done, to get the transformation, to get the change, not to make everyone happy. Too bad if some people are not happy. But we are fighting for a cause larger than ourselves. So that is what we need to protect. And this is not only about getting, let's say, the change in education, it's about the human resources for this country, for Indonesia's future. That's what we need to protect. So having a clarity of purpose and also the why, I think help leaders to make bold decisions on things that really matter. And it sets the tone for everyone where to focus and how to get the job done. Again, it's, I think the crisis, really push us to the limit. Yeah.
Challenge yourselves.
Challenges ourselves, yeah.
Very good. I think that's a very interesting insight into things that happen behind the scenes, which you sometimes are not aware of. I feel very proud that you've been able to persevere through all the political pot shots, to all the so many different, I would say, attacks on the programs that you all have been doing. You've persevered, and you've come through with real outcomes. And in 3 years, we see real outcomes through the ministry. And so, congratulations for that part. So, are there any questions, everyone? Because we're going to be wrapping very soon. Anybody wants to ask a question? Feel free. Okay, Dr. Bayu.
Thank you. Quick questions. So I'm happy that G20 has got some agreements on the principle, and as you mentioned that after the principle is the important is executions. So the next G20 will be in September in Delhi. So during these 10 months, what would be the action plan that we can see before the next G20? Thank you.
The next action plan will be dependent on the presidency itself. So I mentioned earlier about the issue note that we had to develop at the beginning. India needs to do the same. However, we know that the commitment to equity is there, because that is the most worrying part of the impact of pandemic to education, the widening equity problem. And all countries, even like the most developed countries, they know that this is very, very dear to their heart. And the second one, I think, this is not I think, and this is what from the multilateral forums, especially the Transforming Education Summit in the UN, I think this will also influence the G20, which is the digital technologies part. I think we need to continue the discussion about what we know and then what we learn and then how we can do better in taking the advantage of this momentum in education especially, to use the digital technology to accelerate the problem solving for the issue of access, the issue of quality, and the issue of equity. So education and technology, I think, are at the moment, I've never seen technologies used or dominating education like this time. But the challenge for the education sector is, so what, right? So how we can take advantage of this. What we don't want is technology is just being used for flashy and just sophisticatedness. What we need is we need to gear technology for the kind of problem that we were trying to solve. And I think that will open a lot of opportunities for how technology can be developed. Because technology is not just something that is static. Technology is always challenged by the inventors to imagine about how to solve different problems. And I think in education, that is one of the important discussion that we need to continue. Thank you, Pat.
Great response by Iwan. Actually, I'm a bit curious, while you were interacting within the G20, was there any difference in the way, the behavior or the communication between the superpower nations and the middle power nations? How does it work, I would say? Did you find that there was a different approach, maybe because they have different problems, right? The issues are different. When you look at the superpowers, they have different issues of education. Middle powers look at it differently. Was there some uniformity there, or how was it?
Well, of course, it's different. Sometimes it's not just about, I think it's the way, because communication is, this is the science in communication, I believe. 90% of communication is done non-verbally, right? Yeah. So I think the tone can be different in some context, but I think the most important part is, especially as chair, is try to get the essence of what they're trying to say, understand that. And I think the biggest asset, I think, as presidency and as a chair, I think, is the ability to listen with empathy for all the delegates. So sometimes delegates, especially those who maybe, whose English is not like first language, have some like maybe more different ways of trying to communicate their message. I think in the multilateral forum, I think maybe you already know, it's not only what is spoken during formal meetings. What's even more important, I think, in business, this is also happening as well, the 15 minutes coffee break that can be even more powerful than 2-hour meeting. You can get the message done, you can get the conflicts resolved, you can clarify many things. I think that is, I think, true in many contexts.
So the informal channels work a lot.
The informal channels work
a lot.
Yeah.
So okay, Patrick, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Iwan. I mean, fascinating to hear about what you've been trying to achieve and what you've actually achieved. How do the people out there know about what you are doing and how you're doing it? Because I think this is a story for people to hear, right? I mean, this is radical, what you are doing. You're actually revolutionizing the way a country works, which, yeah, I'm sure a lot of the other ministries need to learn from, but I think it's the people out there who really need to know, because I think the confidence in the government has a lot to do with what people know about you. And I don't think anybody, I mean, I definitely didn't know. I don't know how many people out there really know about what you guys do. So how does this spread to the people at the ground level so that they really know that this is happening and they can take advantage of all the great programs that you have for them, which are made for them or tailor-made for them, right? So how does that sort of percolate down to all the levels, and how do you make it happen?
By following the Indonesia Economic Forum. I stole his idea. Yeah, but that was on a lighter vein. But Iwan, please, the floor is yours.
I think in a team of transformation, we need a good comms team. I know, then this is also what we have experienced, when we want to transform, when we want to change radically, especially the mindset, there's a lot of noise of resistance, and that will dominate the ecosystem of like communication ecosystem. But a good comms team, I think, at least for us now, as much as we need better comms team in terms of not to communicate that, yeah, because I know, I think because of the scale of Indonesia, Pak, I think if we are not this big and this complex, I think we can do a lot better. But we have, like the local government I just mentioned to you, right? And on top of that, like the political ecosystem that we also need to manage. So a good comms team, and I think we have it now, is not only about communicating these messages, but I think most importantly is the crisis handling. But I think that's also as important as that. But the communication about what we're trying to do, I think this is still a homework, and especially for me, this is my my new role now. Previously, I was the DG for teachers. Now I'm the DG, basically DG for schools, from all from early childhood, basic and secondary education. My main task is actually to market to stakeholders, and the important one is the local government. So how to get the first they know, sometimes as simple as they know, like you said, it's not there. And first they know, and second, when they know, they understand, and then therefore they will support and commit to be part of change. I think this is still, honestly for me, is a work in progress in my new role. But I believe, again, we, with the spirit of gotong royong, like there are several, at least 3 local government leaders, Bupati, Wali Kota, Governor, that I interacted today. Very positive about what we're trying to do. Even one Wali Kota, one mayor, mentioned to me, please, Pak Iwan, make my kota to be your lab. Do whatever you want to my kota. I leave it to you and your team. And because there is already trust there, right? So I think this is what we need to continue doing. And I always feel hopeful, Pak, because I think our challenge, why the local governments or the ecosystem are not moving, sometimes it's not because of they don't want to. Sometimes it's just it's not clear for them, or maybe they don't know. So we need to do more communication on that part. And I think if you can be also the part of like the, what do you call that, the messengers for Merdeka Belajar, or what we're trying to do. And of course, with our collaboration in one way or another, I think we can spread this. I think the way I see it is always, it's not half glass empty, but half glass full. So then how to get a little bit better, and then we can reach the ideal state that we want. Maybe it's always a work in progress, but we need to continue making progress. Thank you. Thank you, Pat. Thank you.
So, you know, Iwan, actually that economic forum wants to do that. We want to amplify and resonate great ideas, great achievements, because that's how you build consensus, and then people learn from that process. I think there's a lesson in what you're doing for a lot of people in the corporate sector. And these are the kind of ideas that sharing that has to be done both ways, because it's not always a corporate experience that helps a government, because you are handling scale, which I think most corporates don't have to, because they can choose where they want to be. But in government, you don't have a choice. There is a remote area, you have to be there. That's the role of the government, whether you like it or not. Your job is a lot more complicated than any corporate sitting here who can choose to be in the markets they want to be. So I think, I commend you for that. So we want to close this note on a couple of points. You mentioned the elephant in the room was the geopolitical situation. And we've talked about it more openly in the earlier sessions, even yesterday, Russia, Ukraine, and many other issues that came up, which came in the way of a lot of I would say, outcomes that could have been there. But as you go in from G20 now into the ASEAN, I think there's a similar role for Indonesia in its chairmanship of ASEAN. And there are geopolitical issues there as well. You have to handle the Myanmar issue there. And there are a few other challenges within that. So do you see a similar kind of an approach, or what are the takeaways that you got from your G20 experience, which you think will now be applied to ASEAN, because you're now dealing with more like-minded organizations where Indonesia is the big brother, which is different from Indonesia's position in G20, right? So I think there will be a very productive ASEAN role in the chairmanship of ASEAN, especially in education, to bring about a certain kind of a consensus within the ASEAN nations. How do you see that?
Yeah, definitely different ecosystem. I think in ASEAN, the spirit of the ASEAN spirit is there. I think G20 is much, you got all 5 continents and the variety of the members and the special invitees. In ASEAN, I think we are more optimistic in terms of not having the geopolitical issue to be the problem, just like how it was in G20. And therefore, we could have a more productive meeting. And hopefully what we need to see is, at the very least, commitment of all the state leaders for education, not only for recovery, but also to transform the education. I think this is, again, and what does it mean? It means that we need to protect the finance of education, funding the education. For the recovery, maybe it's for a lot of programs, and then you take away from the education budget. And I think that's not aligned with the spirit of protect the commitment for education, reimagination, or transformation. What it means that we need to improve in terms of equity. What it means that we need to explore the use of technology. And then we need to strengthen how education is not seen as just like a government's program, but it takes a village to educate a child kind of spirit. And for what is relevant for the future. I think this is what we need also to see from ASEAN, because I think it's the same kind of challenges for education, for the human resources, and for the development in the world. So I hope that ASEAN will have a more productive and maybe more concrete actions in terms of what we need to do.
So, when you started the G20 initiative, you didn't have the geopolitical problem.
No.
It developed halfway in between.
We didn't have any
was a
training
surprise.
in that at all.
Exactly. Hopefully there won't be a new surprise during the ASEAN chairmanship either, right? So I think, Pa Iwan, I'd like to close on a message from you to the room. And I don't just mean the room here, but also the digital audience that we have. Over 700 people on Zoom, YouTube channels, plus I would say 10,000 people across 45 countries in the next 30 days are going to be seeing this episode and listening to the story, the fantastic story or narrative that you actually recounted. It's a great learning, and we're looking forward to that being shared around. But do you have a message for the audience? Because audience is a mix. There are academicians, there's academia here, there's business here, there are foundations here. And what is your message to them that they can help you, or they could be part of this transformation? Maybe it is something they have not done so far, or maybe something they've done but you want them to do more of, or maybe something you don't want them to do because that might be coming in the way. So what's the message? Would you have a message which we can use as the closing for this session?
Wow, this is a very difficult spot. I think if we care about the future of this planet, I think we need to invest in education. Of course, we need to redefine what education is and what education is not. But I think by transforming education, reimagining how learning can happen for our students, for our children, can we only have better hopes for all the crises that are, I think, happening to us or already looming large, that we know that we need to face it or the planet will need to face it. So let's problem solve together. I think let's collaborate together. No matter how strong the collaboration has been, I think it needs to be only stronger. No matter how great the ideas that we have, we need even greater ideas. And I think education is always going to be the foundation of the kind of civilization that we imagine. Education is like planting seeds. Education is a long-term game. So again, it's like if we care about the future of our time, of our generation, of our planet, future generation in particular, then let's invest in education. I think the government needs to be open to different ways of doing the education, managing the education. I think Indonesia in particular, I think we are at the moment in one of our most radical transformation for our education system. For those, I think especially for if you are in Indonesia, I think we need more of collaboration. We need more complex problems that we need to solve. The Merdeka Belajar movement is only the beginning. And I hope by only continuing this together, can we achieve great results for this country and hopefully for the whole world. Thank you.
Fantastic. A round of applause for Iwan.
Yeah.
I think he couldn't have said it better. That was a call to action, I would put it, because there is a potential for collaboration for companies. Even if you're not in education, you don't have to invest in education by being in education. You have to support education initiatives, and there are many ways to do that. It's not just being in CSR, because that's an old concept. The idea of contributing to education can be looked at in very different ways, because I think this I echo from a meeting I had with you and with Mas Mantri recently, where he said, there's nothing wrong in doing things which are good for business. So companies should look at this is good for business and we want to be doing this, because at the end of the day, there is a ROI which they can quantify, which sometimes corporates are required to do so. However, corporates may not be looking at the long game the same way, because the KPIs are always issued for this year and the next year at the most. So how do you play a long game when the executive himself doesn't know if he's around for 10 years? So the long game is a different kind of thinking, and a different kind of organizational commitment is needed, which transcends across leadership. So that's a commitment an organization makes regardless of who's going to be the CEO 10 years from now. And that kind of commitment to be developed at large organizations, I think, is the call of the hour, the need of the hour. So with that, I would like to close the session. Thank you very much. Everybody has been a fantastic contributor. A warm applause for Pa Iwan as well as all of you. And I think, Pa Iwan, we are closing this session on a very strong note. Thank you for making the time to be here. We spent a marathon 2 days. Looking at some very difficult topics and ideas, and I felt we dissected it well enough to get a discussion going. And this discussion will continue online on our YouTube channels and our social media channels. We hope that there will be a lot of interaction that will help us to come to some conclusion. Our goal is that in 30 to 60 days, we would be able to put these outcomes of this conference with the inputs from the public and the other audiences over the next 30 days into some kind of a document or a recommendations or a white paper, if you may want to call it, which hope we can be able to then share forward elsewhere. So I would be happy if I can get some things from you, Pa Iwan, which you might want to put into that document, which will then be circulated wide and far.